Hello, and welcome to Conversations from the World of Allergy, a podcast produced by the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. I am your host, Rebecca Saff. Today's edition of our Conversations from the World of Allergy podcast will focus on a new task force that has been formed by the AAAAI Board. This task force, named the Allergy and Immunology Scientific Community Task Force, was formed in response to the proposed changes in NIH funding and structure. Dr. Carla Davis is leading the task force and is here today to discuss the importance of the NIH to scientific discovery and the effects the proposed changes could lead to. Dr. Davis is the chair of pediatrics and child health at Howard University College of Medicine. She is an NIH-funded investigator with expertise in translational research studies for the assessment of clinical tolerance to allergic disease and the identification of clinical biomarkers, as well as a focus on improving the quality of life in children with food allergies and other allergic diseases. She has been involved in numerous AAAAI committees, and she is currently the president-elect of the AAAAI. Dr. Davis, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
It is absolutely my pleasure to be here.
I'd like to start by asking why you chose allergy immunology as your field.
Well, when I was in college, I had a friend, a dear friend, whose niece was actually born with severe combined immunodeficiency. So as a very young student, I began to learn about the immune system, and it just fascinated me. I learned about bone marrow transplant at that time, and I don't think I realized how much being exposed at that early time in my career would influence me. But because it was so fascinating during medical school, these patients were the most interesting to me, and I love taking care of them. Additionally, I had fantastic mentors like Becky Buckley, Louise Margaret, and Bashir, who encouraged me to come to the field. And so, and I've never looked back. And I'm so glad that I am still in the field.
It's amazing what those early influences can do. Getting kids excited about science makes such a difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about the research that you've been doing?
Sure. I even though I was very interested in immunodeficiency early in my career, I noticed that food allergy really didn't have as much immunologic basis of knowledge regarding, what caused the reactions and the differences in the different foods. And so I became really fascinated with food allergy and noticed that many patients were significantly impacted in their quality of life. So I specifically focus on food allergy, and even within food allergy, shellfish allergy, because I have many relatives and friends who have shrimp allergy. I do translational work in the area, looking and laboratory work looking at the immune basis of shellfish allergy, but I also early on look at food-associated disease like eosinophilic gastrointestinal disease, the allergy of the GI tract. And it's been just an amazing journey to see the advances in the field over the past 20 years. So that's what I do. I also will say that I have a special interest in health equity, just making sure that that everyone has an opportunity to reach their optimal health status.
I think it's amazing the changes we've seen in food allergy over the past 20 years, the developments, the oral immunotherapy that's now available for our patients, the omalizumab data that's allowing patients to have these accidental exposures. And so we really see what the research has done for this field and how it's really changed care for our patients.
Yes, absolutely. CARE has done a 180 in food allergy. When I trained, we were avoiding foods in little children. Now we encourage food introduction. And that all came from the research that was funded by the National Institutes of Health. Right now, some of the work that I do, the work that I describe, is funded by the National Institutes of Health, and getting new medications for food associated diseases and food allergies is just a key contributor to the advancement of improved quality of life in our patients.
So in the past 2 months, we've just seen these huge cuts that have been proposed in NIH funding. More than $1.5 billion of research funding is undispersed, even though it has been already approved. What effect is this having on the scientific community?
It is really quite profound what these cuts are really doing to gut what is the scientific infrastructure of the United States and the development of new treatments that would go to patients, as well as really crippling the development of the workforce, the scientific workforce in America. The recent actions taken are really threatening the life-saving research National Institutes of Health funds because, as you mentioned, the research funding was frozen and then cut. Also, we know that there was important data and resources that were pulled down from public websites. I personally, can't get the kind of information about infectious diseases and things that I really know impact my health. And the firing of over 1,000 NIH employees and restricted communications and travel for NIH staff, as well as censoring communications on important scientific topics, have not only disrupted basic research, but they disrupted clinical trials. This delays medical breakthroughs. And most importantly, it limits patients' access to life-saving treatments and preventative treatments. So I'm right now seeing labs close, early career researchers leave the field, and ultimately, all of this really hinders the nation's health, not only today, but down the line, we will see a larger effect of these changes.
I think this communications question is so important as well, that so much of the scientific community, the success of the United States is having this amazing kind of network of researchers that could interact, could share data, and not having that available really hampers the ability of researchers to further the health of patients, to understand the threats that are to the health that we're facing. And so I think that that's really important, as well as seeing early researchers leave the field because they just see that there's not the funding.
Absolutely. What really pained me was to see the first death in a young child from measles, which in 20 years, it really is profound that we're seeing deaths because of the lack of communication and the ignorance of the public with regard to what the kind of information really benefits each and every one of us.
So, one of the things that has come up is a proposed cap on what's called the facilities and administrative costs that would reduce the amount of money that institutions would receive in supporting scientists. For those people that may not be aware, what are these facility and administrative funds? They're often called indirect costs. What is it used for, and why is it so important?
Yeah, these indirect costs or these facilities and administrative costs that come along with grants that are funded through the government and National Institutes of Health are absolutely critical for the performance of the studies. And the reason why this is so critical is because the labs where the scientists do the work and the buildings where the labs are housed and all of the regulatory things that need to happen in terms of disposal of waste, cybersecurity, utilities, all the businesses that provide the supplies for the experiments, the maintenance, and regulatory personnel. All of that is included in the indirect costs, and there's no way that the money that comes could actually be performed without the indirect costs. It's almost like saying to a baseball player, I am going to give you your salary, but I'm not going to give you the stadium. I'm not going to give you a playing field. You're not going to really have any bats or balls, but I am definitely giving you the salary, right? So that player could not do anything. without all of the supporting infrastructure around the player. And so that's really, for a scientist, what cutting the indirect rate is. Many people think that the indirect rate is just padding the budgets of institutions, but institutions don't have the funds to to fund these labs and the buildings, because in their institutional funds or their endowments, the funds are actually dedicated to specific other causes, right? And other, they're already budgeted for other things, to pay for other things. So really, this cap is going to all but eliminate biomedical research and the development of new treatments at academic centers. This is why it's really, really critical that these cuts really don't happen.
I think the analogy to a sports player getting their salary and nothing else, no trainers, no field to practice on, no bats and balls, is such a great analogy, because it really shows that it takes this entire support structure to really bring out the research that needs to be done. You need a genomic center if we're going to have great genetic data in order to be able to identify genes that cause disease and learn how to treat them. Oftentimes, these are rare diseases that need that support structure under them. So I love that analogy. And nearly every FDA-approved drug has really started with NIH-supported research. What are some of the most important medications that we've seen in allergy immunology that have come from the NIH research? I'm sure there's millions, but could you give us some examples? Because it's been really amazing to think about what's come out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that just in my field alone, we talked a little bit about how the drug omalizumab, also called Xolair, is a medication that was developed for food allergy through a National Institutes of Health funded Consortium for Food Allergy Research clinical trial. This clinical trial is ongoing, and omalizumab has just transformed the treatment of a food allergy, because anaphylaxis, which is a life-threatening allergic reaction, really had no preventative treatment besides just avoid the food, which in and of itself causes a significant poor quality of life in patients. And now omalizumab is available to prevent these reactions. So additionally, this medication was developed, the efficacy was shown in asthma through an NIH trial. And so children with asthma now, as young as 6 years, can actually take this medication and have improvement in their response to viral infections. And other medications, dupilumab, or also called Dupixent, is a medication that's transformed atopic dermatitis and eczema. And so this is another NIH-funded network that was utilized to really develop that treatment that's transformed lives. Some of the others include the tyrosine kinase inhibitors for mastocytosis, also JAK inhibitors for atopic dermatitis and other diseases, it's even primary immunodeficiency diseases. That is really transforming the lives of patients. So the other I will just quickly mention, which is not necessarily a drug, but a treatment that you mentioned in the beginning, was oral immunotherapy for food allergy. Through the Learning Early About Peanut Allergy study, we found out that that early introduction was very important of peanut in the diet in order to prevent food allergy. And we also, through NIH studies, through the Consortium for Food Allergy Research, have learned that young patients, even toddlers, really respond well to taking a little bit of food over time and increasing that. And that produces tolerance. The National Institutes of Health, through the Immune Tolerance Network, really enabled the discoveries that have transformed our field and improved patients' lives. So
And
these are just a few. And development with these cuts will be stopped.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interest in what are the things we can even do naturally to improve our health, and learning about food as the way early introduction being so important for kids in developing tolerance, learning how we can use food as a treatment for food allergy, all the research that's currently going on in the microbiome and how that impacts, our development of allergies, our development of other chronic diseases. All of this is so important for our patients. And I love the immune deficiency, we see all these examples now where we can identify a particular mutation and then develop drugs to target it. And APDS and leniolisib is a fantastic example of how research came together, identified this mutation, found the patients with it, and then found a drug that would actually inhibit just that protein. Really just incredible for our patients.
Absolutely. And we are on a way of becoming more and more personalized, giving personalized medication and personalized treatment specifically for patients, just for a specific disease. And with these NIH cuts, that is really in jeopardy.
And we've seen the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic on what it did, having this new emerging infectious disease come out and how it affected our entire world. And now we're seeing the spread of measles and avian flu. We're seeing the threat of that and what it's done, not only the threat of it being a disease that could spread through humans, but it's decimated our ability to have eggs and chickens right now. How do you see these changes that have been proposed affecting our ability to respond to these threats?
Mhm. Well, I do believe that these cuts are really bioterrorism, threat, because as we saw in the pandemic, so many people have exposed to a virus or bacterial, any pathogen that our immune system can't handle, would cause not only mass sickness but death if we don't have the scientists poised, like we saw in the pandemic, to immediately study what's happening and the viruses, and then if we don't even know that the infections are happening, then we can't respond. And even now, on a yearly basis, we know that our flu vaccines are altered so that they are more effective to the flu strains that are coming out, from year to year. And with disruption in NIH infrastructure as well as funding, we may really be unprepared for any attacks. This is really a huge, huge threat.
And in addition, there's a physician shortage in the United States and projected to get worse over time as people retire and our population expands and ages. How do you think this is going to affect training for physicians?
Well, right now, we've really witnessed just the chilling effect that the lack of NIH funding, as well as the disruption to the infrastructure and leadership at the NIH, have affected the physicians that are training, physician scientists that are training, and even college students that are training. I wrote a letter of recommendation for a college student that was going to go to summer program that would develop his research skills. And then a month after he applied, he shared that that program was canceled. And so without the funding to develop and train physician scientists, we won't have the pipeline of scientists that can be trained to respond to bioterrorism threats or develop new therapies. I really fear that more students and emerging doctors will be forced to train in other countries. And that'll result in more doctor shortages than there are now. And, we don't really think about it, but 88% of medical schools in the US benefit from NIH funding to enhance medical education. So without this NIH funding, the medical education system will greatly suffer and produce fewer doctors. And there's already a shortage, a huge shortage that is predicted. So I also worry that these bright young people will begin to move rapidly overseas to do their training and development in other countries. And so I think ultimately we'll be unable to train PhDs and MDs, and that will ultimately drive up healthcare costs, not decrease it. And I might mention that that $47 billion from NIH really directly supports jobs, 400,000 jobs, and many people may not realize this, but our pharmaceutical industry takes the scientific breakthroughs from the laboratories and academic medical centers and at NIH and uses those to develop the drugs and the the products that help the patients. And so that then you could say that the NIH is actually fueling another $1.55 trillion in pharma and biotech industry work that really represents about 2 to 3 million jobs. So the defunding of NIH and NIH grants has a much larger effect than what is just the dollar that's going to the NIH. It's much more than that. The National Allergy Bureau team that works with the CDC on projects actually has been let go. And so that has impacted our
The
ability to
pollen
even
counting.
pollen.
Yeah.
Yes, right. So again, it's not just one area of allergy immunology. It's infectious disease, it's immunology, and it's allergy that will be impacted.
Yeah, no, definitely that the pharmaceutical industry is really coming out of this basic science and translational research that's done, funded by the NIH throughout the country, and takes it and is really helps to drive the economy. Now, we all have difficulty with the cost of drugs, but it's a huge part of our economy that is driving and allows for the continued development of drugs. So I'm really excited that the Quad AI has kind of taken this and the initiative to establish this task force. What is the goal of the scientific community task force that the Quad AI is putting together?
Well, really, the goal of the task force is to sound the alarm and increase the awareness of the impact of these NIH cuts and proposed structural changes, so that they really won't happen, and that we can influence our representatives, our senators, to make sure that the NIH scientific infrastructure stays intact in the United States. So it was created to address these challenges, and all of these are facing the research community and then by extension, the allergy immunology community. So we're working with internal and external audiences to really address this. And the Academy itself is there for anybody who has been impacted for these with these changes in order to try and make a difference. We are developing template letters that physicians can use, allergists, immunologists can use to make others aware of this threat. And this is one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast today. We're also communicating and sending letters to legislators to help them understand what impact these changes will have on our nation's health. So we really want to make sure that our scientific community is healthy, and that's why this task force has been convened. We're hoping that everybody will get involved and reach out.
I love this call to action that there are things that we can do in the scientific community to help hopefully stop some of these funding cuts and help to keep the NIH pipeline really intact. And so I also would encourage people to get involved and write to their senator, write to their representative. And I love that the task force is developing language that makes it easy to do that, that you can contact these people and let them know the effect that this is going to have if they don't understand.
Absolutely. Everyone will be impacted, patients and physicians, and again, the overall nation's health. And I believe these are long-standing changes that will not be easily reversible. And so I think that's an important point. The funding that NIH receives, $1 has about at least tenfold return on investment. Today we have really reviewed the impact of the current proposed changes to the National Institutes of Health and the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and how the changes will really hurt the scientific biomedical infrastructure that will impact not only training physician scientists and the scientific workforce, but most importantly, patients. So we all need to have our hands to the plow to make sure that everyone knows that this is going to be something that we need to tell our representatives not to vote for.
That's so important, that this is something that we need to do for our scientific community now, but also for the investment in the future, for our patients, for our young scientists that are considering whether to dedicate themselves to understanding disease and developing treatment better, and to all the generations behind us that look to us to really lead research in the medical field.
Absolutely. It's so important. And the time is now to make a difference. Decisions will be made at the end of this month and at the beginning of next month. So things are moving rapidly. Everyone needs to get involved.
So we urge you to reach out to your congressman, reach out to your senator, let them know the effect of these cuts. And thank you so much, Dr. Davis, for being with us today and sharing the call to get out there and move the needle forward.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me and for highlighting this important issue.
We hope you enjoyed listening to today's episode. Please visit quadai.org for show notes and any pertinent links from today's conversation. If you like the show, please take a moment to contact your senator or representative about the importance of supporting scientific research and the continued support of the NIH. Do this for yourself, the scientific community, and for all your patients. Thank you again for listening.